introduce our guest preacher. I met our guest preacher, whom I shall be mentioning the name later on. Some time back, a few of us organized a seminar to honor Reverend John Gatu, and also to discuss his book, The Fanning the Frame. And we organized that with a few other people, and one of the people we organized with is in the audience, Professor Silas Mutiso. He's in this audience. He didn't stand when people were asked to stand as visitors, but he's there. And that's when I met our guest speaker this morning. Thereafter, our friendship flourished. And we found we had common friends. And that friendship continued as we remembered and we celebrated other friends of ours. And then later on, I came to know his wife, Dr. Ann Omodi, who is with us this morning. Welcome. And the friendship continued to flower, and our guest speaker also became a friend of my son. And they are very, very close, and he is teaching my son Kikuyu. Our guest speaker this morning is Right Reverend Dr. Francis Omodi, who is the ACK Bishop of Diocese of Garissa. Bishop Dr. Francis Omodi is a priest, a scholar, a teacher, and a writer, and also a community leader. He was consecrated an ACK Bishop of Diocese of Garissa in a colorful ceremony on May 9th this year at All Saints Cathedral. And I had the honor to be there. He started his education in Nairobi, and then he went into the rural areas to learn a little bit of Luo. Then later on, he joined Kenyatta University for undergraduate studies, obtained a B.Ed degree in business education and economics, and he now holds a master's degree in theology from South African Theological Seminary, where he also acquired a PhD in theology. He has also other postgraduate certificates from the Institute of Islam and Christianity in London. He is very knowledgeable on many African languages, and he has the credit of being fluent in more than almost 20 languages. Koguo mungenda kumwariria na Gikuyu no mumwariria na Gikuyu. Na imagine no arie na Gikuyu. This morning we are honored to have you, Bishop, preaching to us. Welcome.
I will seek the lost, bring back the strays, bandage the injured, strengthen the weak, but I will destroy the fat and the strong. I will shepherd them with justice. In the name of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, the meditation of our heart and the words of our mouth be acceptable in your sight. Will you, O Lord, add strength to your word and give us to fellowship so strongly over these issues. The issues around our countries are weighing us down, and we pray that we may figure out what you ask of us, people of faith. Bless us now because we've prayed in Jesus' name. Amen. I do not know how to wash all that he has said so that we can be normal and just continue. But I'm not very strange to your congregation, though I have not come to this church ever since I was born. But I've been to St. Andrews, and we've been together on webinar. You may remember last year, over the same period, I was one of your guest speakers, and we were discussing the then hot issue that emerged in our country about the Gen Zs. To say that our country is at a crossroad is to underestimate or is to be more mild. We are really headed into anarchy if God doesn't intervene. You've all seen this. In early days, we always thought it was a few people and many of us were secure. But today we tend to see that everyone is faced with this, the whole country, from the north to south, from east to west. For this reason, desperate efforts are being made both privately and publicly to try and avert this disaster. And we can't fold our hands and wish someone solves it if we also don't do our part. I was very eager and excited when this month came and to see you holding that up. The month and the idea of discussing peace, justice, and reconciliation in our country is a great plus to your church. Many of us do not face these issues as it is. We read about them from other media, either media or the secular lines, but to mainstream it in church, to discuss it as Christians and to bring it to the pulpit is very rare, and which is why I wanted to commend you. So when I was asked to come, I really jumped onto that and to make sure that I can be sure I'm busy, but this was something I wanted to give priority. I understand the angst that you people have, or the committee had, that we discuss the struggles that are in our country. But this topic, building and sustaining structures and processes that would ensure we all live in peace, justice, and hope, is very, very important, and we've got to put it with us as that route that we are using to go to heaven. Many people feel that heaven is the most important thing we should do, but let the world burn, and the fires that burn the world will propel us to heaven like a hot balloon. But no, God is calling us to do something before he receives us there. I was marveled again at the choice of text. The choice of Ezekiel was not more appropriate to discuss these. And there are lessons that we could draw from it to help us move forward. Ezekiel himself was a young man at the time God started speaking to him. His career as a priest was truncated before he began. He was among the Hebrew children forced into exile in the year 596 BC, when the king of Babylon breached Jerusalem and grabbed many of the young people and took them with him to exile. As an exile, he sat by the rivers Maybe they are the ones who meditated on Jeremiah's letter and gave us the Psalm 137. By the waters of Babylon, they remembered Jerusalem. All these people longed to go back to that city where worship took place. Nowhere like Jerusalem had they the kind of worship, the kind of choir, the kind of Levitical pomp, the kind of worship that touched heaven as they thought. No one thought Jerusalem would be breached because of the temple and the way they had seen themselves before God. But from the prophet's word, we realize that God condemned them, not because of the worship they had in the sanctuaries, but rather because of the issues of justice that they did not observe and the breaking of the law of God that now forced him to take action. 5 years into exile, Ezekiel began seeing visions, strange things. As you read chapter 1 up to 30, he was seeing those visions that God was showing him. And now he had now done more years. It was towards 586. God started showing him what he is again about to do in Jerusalem. He had been lamenting and asking God, why would you treat us like this? And we have worshipped you diligently. We did everything that was required according to Levitical rules, particularly in the sanctuary. Why wouldn't you rescue us? There was nowhere else in the world Jehovah God was respected as in Israel. Babylon was a heathen country. Why would God use heathen people to destroy them? These were lamentations that he heard and was always bringing to God. It is this that God in response told him that Jerusalem will also be breached, and this time the temple won't be spared. The temple will go up to flames. And he pointed to why he would do that. Let's read this again and see chapter 34 giving us the details why God was now set to punish the people and drive them into further exile. Ezekiel had the same style with other prophets. Their messaging came in this pattern. The first, they exposed the sins of the people. What people had done wrong was told them, and they were shown what they were not doing according to God's will. Second, the prophet predicted punishment, and that punishment came to pass. Thirdly, in that punishment, the prophet gave them a word of hope, what God was going to do beyond punishment, really showing them that punishment was not the end, but was just a way God was reminding them over what they ought to do. In chapter 34, he follows the same pattern. You see, the first part of that chapter, 1 to 10, God rebuking the shepherds and addressing them in three ways. First, address to the shepherds of Israel, what they were doing in mistreating the flock under their care. Then God rebuked the sheep, the very strong flock that were stronger and were mistreating the weak. They were not who needed care. They were goring them. They were not doing what they should do to one another. And thirdly, God predicted his intervention. And in his intervention, he promised that he will take charge of his sheep and remove the false shepherd and also become faithful shepherd of his flock. Those are the three things we see in chapter 34. In this whole thing, God is giving them a vision of what kind of people they ought to have been. He's giving them a vision of how he will intervene and remain among them. A vision of how God, who lives with us, expected them to operate, and what an ideal community of faith ought to have been when God has restored his people. So for today, we are looking at justice, reconciliation, and peace. We are looking at how we can develop structures and processes that can sustain the whole idea of peace, the whole idea of justice, and therefore give us hope to live in this world that is full of turmoil. Let's see what he does. God first gives a very sharp rebuke from what we read to the shepherds. The shepherd was a metaphor that was commonly used for kings and political leaders. He said, I raised David as a shepherd of my people. It's today that they kept calling me Muchungaji, or in your other mitarataras, you call them what, Mutugateri. I wondered why didn't they use Mureithi? I've never heard them call Muchungaji Mureithi. I thought Mureithi is the closest if you are directly translating. But that is my wondering. Mureithi Wangodu would have been better. I wanted to know whether we are together. God rebuked them because he used this word, hoi in Hebrew, which meant woe. This was common in prophetic writings. It pronounced doom, and it also had a significance of a funeral. It was an address that the end has come to this person. So he said, woe to the shepherds. The shepherds neglected to do their work. The reason God the reason for the Exodus from Egypt in the book of Exodus, was that people of Israel would come out and worship God. Many think, or many have assumed, that God was making the people of Israel to leave Egypt so that he can give them land. But from what we are seeing written in scriptures, God raised them, removed them from Egypt so that he can create a worshiping community. It is this worship community that he then gave them land, removing others from what land they occupied so that they could occupy it for the express purpose that they would worship him. Remember how Moses argues with Pharaoh. Let my people go so that they can worship me. It wasn't a decoy. It wasn't a ploy. God intended that those people would worship him. And that is why before even they entered Canaan, he instituted and gave them instructions of what that worship would be. In the Mount of Horeb, in the Mount of God in Sinai, God then instituted those three elements of worship. The first was liturgy in the sanctuary, what they would do as rituals, how they would worship, the rules they would keep, how they would adore him, and how they would make God holy and relate with him as a holy people. That's where the music comes. That's where the choir is. That's where the preaching comes in. The second level was liturgy in the society. The word liturgy is service. What service they give to the society. But this is what took a bulk of God's instructions. It had more than 500 laws that they were to keep. It involved how they related one to another. It involved issues about labor, issues about justice, issues about land. It involved the obligation of the people to the poor, to the orphans, to the widows, and even to the strangers. God gave them strict laws over how to treat one another. It has been summarized in that word, love your neighbor as yourself. This was an integral part of their worship. And thirdly, liturgy on nature, how they would treat nature. The laws that if you don't handle nature well, you will destroy yourselves. The idea of Jubilee year, plow your farm for 7 years, let it fallow. Which trees to cut. The idea of not killing the animal with its child and cooking them. The idea of don't kill a bird with its eggs. Choose either the eggs or the bird. Do you see that? So don't order for chicken and egg in the same meal. All right? If you want the chicken, let the eggs go. They may hatch something else. So then you get obese and you have problem, you have cholesterol. See, all these things were rules that were to help people live in harmony. All these were part of worship. It showed them when you don't do those things, don't drop the waste inside the tent. Go outside. And when you go outside, do what? Have a pit latrine, trig it and put it in the ground. All these laws are in that Levitical order. And he was saying, if you keep these laws, Deuteronomy, before they entered the land, God will leave you in the land that you will be in. If you score 30 out of 100, do you pass or fail? Come on. And these people did very well in the liturgical worship in the temple. But when it came to rules of how they dealt with one another, how they dealt with nature, they dismally performed, and therefore God had to remove them from land. The visions Ezekiel was being shown was that God valued strongly these other rules of how they treated one another than worship. Worship is something that evolved, and they saw that. So it was this that these people had failed. And look at how he points to their sins. The leaders started exploiting the flock. They ate what they should not eat. Or instead of feeding and making sure everyone had what they need or what they needed, the leaders fed themselves first. The context of what Ezekiel was discussing at that point was also amazing, because it was that period between the first attack and the imminent attack that was coming, that 10-year period. He was mulling over these issues. The king of Israel that was left in Jerusalem was plotting how they can fight Babylon. And he was making alliances with Egypt and Syria. And to form that kind of alliances, because there was scarcity of resources, since most of it was taken in the first exile, they then started exploiting what people had. What we see here was metaphor. These people were not just eating sheep. It was just metaphor to show that people represented the sheep. But these people went on to exploit and take over what they should not take. They were given responsibility to administer justice, but they failed to administer justice. And therefore the sheep were sick, neglected. They were injured, and many got lost. They were harsh in their rule, and therefore the sheep were scattered in reference to this exile. Because of this failure, the sheep then turned onto each other. Where the country or the people were not giving leadership and showing them what to do, people started fighting and exploiting each other. The strong exploited the weak. Those who hired people to work for them never paid them. And that is why he's saying those who are strong exploited the weak. Those who had responsibility towards their neighbors failed to do what they should have done. The weaker became weaker, the stronger became stronger, and therefore they were scattered and they were vulnerable. It was for this reason that exile had to come. Emile Durkheim, the 19th century French sociologist, would have recognized such rupture in this society. He had argued that societies are held together by a web of social bonds that give both individual and the society a sense of collectiveness, that they can engage in a nation which is a bigger project than themselves. Societies that are most susceptible to this kind of breaking, of people fighting and leaders not participating with those they lead, emerge because these social bonds are broken, and therefore the equilibrium that should have held people together are shattered. Durkheim called such a state hopelessness and of hopelessness and despair, anomie, which he defined to mean rulelessness. There was no particular rule that governed. When the rules that should have organized them as a society in Israel were jettisoned, were rejected, therefore everyone was surviving for themselves. Therefore so Ezekiel was now a prophet to these political leaders and was showing them that you as shepherd have fed yourself and not the sheep, and therefore God will now destroy you, and the plans you are making for self-preservation would fail. Apply this in our time. This criticism for Israel leaders has a word for many of us who hold public and or pastoral offices in our land. By telling these people that they failed, Ezekiel is giving us a picture in our time that we who hold public position could even be a teacher. You hold public position. In your home, you hold public position. We are not doing what we ought to do. And that is the picture Ezekiel is telling us. The first verses, 1 to 10, remind us that we who hold this leadership have responsibilities. And it's not just to draw from it, but that our responsibilities should give us urgency to do what we ought to do to those under our care. In Kenya, the old rules, though were not perfect, but usually helped people hold together. The rules, for example, that when you work hard, obeyed the laws, and got good education, you could achieve a stable employment. The rules that if you took your goods to the market and worked hard, you could earn a living and support your family. The rules that social mobility, you could go up and even have financial security if you were just diligent and work hard. Today, it's not those who work hard, but those who cut deals. And even those who cut deals look for those who work hard. And there are those who are stinking wealthy. But if you look what they do, you would not know. If you ever lived in Kenya in the 80s, you would hear that man who used to sing, Ukimwona Sigalame. And there's someone who used Sigalame who used to live in Bungoma. And in Bungoma he was doing biashara. Na hiyo biashara anajua mwenyewe. Kwa imwari kuinywe. Where were you? Ulisikia Utasikia ukiona si Kalame anaishi Bungoma, na huko Bungoma anafanya biashara, na hiyo biashara anajua mwenyewe. That's what has emerged. We have people who know the secret towards ascension. You heard recently a senator talking things that should not have even been mentioned about our leaders, our female leaders in parliament. I mean, this is the world we are in. And it's been world of brokerage and world of wealth. The capture of political and economic power by corporate elites is what is also ruining us. Along with that redirecting of all our institutions toward consolidating their power and wealth, have worked hard towards breaking the social bond and social equilibrium that we have. Our corporate coup d'etat and failed democracy has freed the oligarch and the elite to do all immoral things, and they do not have any legal constraint. The state of disorganization or anomie in our country reflects what Durkheim had seen, and the problem, it weighs on the poor very heavily. This is exactly what even Ezekiel was seeing in his people. Amin Durkheim said, that collective expresses, the people have lacked that collectiveness, the collective that expresses that meaningful work, democratic participation, and worship, and even patriotism is what should be values that drive us and make us believe in a nation that we live in together. But these values have all been shunned. It's personal loyalty. It is bootlicking and something different. This rulelessness, this anomie is best seen also in the two strata of justice in this nation, judiciary in this nation. There is an aggressiveness in criminalizing the poor. The ruling elite are given virtually immunity in the courts. They are protected. They either use high-priced lawyers or laws that are written are not enforced on them. Amidst this selective enforcement of laws and rulelessness, people then become rules unto themselves. You see how a society breaks down gradually because of neglecting to keep simple laws and rules that are given to govern how we conduct ourselves. This is what the Gen Zs last year rose against. They were fighting that we need those bonds restored. The Gen Zs then argued that we want this country to work for us. I want, when I have worked, when I've studied, I can be appointed according to my qualifications. They didn't mind who is appointed, but they wanted the competent people to be appointed. At that time, anyone who knew who got the job that they knew nothing about. And so we were just sinking in a country. And that is what these young people said, no, we want something different. They try to be classified as a people who is leading you, who is provoking you. They said, no, those are not our leaders. We are simply Kenyans. When they were further pushed, you are of which tribe? They said we were? Come on, we were? Tribeless. This was not that they didn't have a tribe, but they were pushing an aspiration that if a country should work, I should never ask you, wewe kabila iliku. Or you should not see someone as ushio nyamu ya ruguru. And then you say with quiet, imagine. You then begin to see that famous saying, because we are married across rings and everybody. We all belong to one country and one people. If these are the strands that we've got to develop, then I am seeing we are beginning to build structures and processes that will deliver justice and peace, and we live in that harmony. The shepherds received their sharp criticism. The sheep were also criticized equally sharp, that they failed in their obligations to the other. And so God then chooses to rescue the situation and uses two steps. First, he must remove those who have failed in their duty. And that is the aspect of his punishment. Two, he takes over to be the shepherd of the sheep. The hope he was given was not that he will protect them from danger. He will allow them to go through this danger, this horror of exile. And it's through the horror of exile that God will now start bringing up what he wanted. And he described his vision to be God will rescue them, he will bring them home. He will lead them to hills, green pastures. He will care for them. He will protect them from raiding animals. He will be God on their side. And he said this time he won't leave them. He will be with them. Can you imagine God in our situation? Can you imagine God walking with you? If it was demonstration, Jesus is also demonstrating. If it is tear gas, unakula pamoja. Can you imagine the kind of boldness you would have? God promises that he will be with his sheep there. This mirrors what is now fulfilled in John 10. Jesus, when he emerged, when he told them, I am the good shepherd, everyone knew that he was referencing to that Ezekiel text. And they marveled because the chapter before that, he had opened the eye of a blind man. They had seen miracles Jesus was doing. He was with the oppressed. He stood with the poor. And when he said, I am the good shepherd, he went on to illustrate a good shepherd, as a good shepherd is the door to the sheep. You can't get access to the sheep until you've gone through him. He even said that he leads them out to green pastures, he brings them back. None is lost that God has given him. He went on to explain that as their shepherd, he gave this new element that he was not like those ones. He was a selfless shepherd, ready to lay his life because of his sheep. And you see how he contrasts in this particular passage, him and the hired hands. When a wolf comes, they take off. But when the wolf comes, the owner of the sheep stands between the wolf and the sheep. He was ready to give his life for the sheep. And that is what signified that he was the shepherd of the sheep. It's a big task, elders, to be given this kind of charge as shepherds of this flock. Don't abandon them when crisis comes. Don't abandon them when they are in need. Interestingly, your flock tend to be homogeneous. I'm in a diocese of very strange people. I have Somalis in it. I have Kambas in it. I now have Sudanese in it. I have Ethiopians in it. And I have almost everybody. You cannot afford to have a Kamwene mentality. And that's what this was. We've got to think like our younger children who are giving us light. No, we've been trapped and they wanted to get us out of a trap. So Ezekiel, in this vision, had seen afar. And Jesus was fulfilling this vision. But when we are faced with such a plight, we need to have a response, and our response should be selflessness. People always see the illustration of Jesus as a servant leader. That is easy. And we've seen servant leaders who only serve one side. They are still servants, aren't they? You can prejudice, you can serve. Like, we have a servant leader. If someone says the presidents of this country are servant leaders, if someone will say, yes, he's a servant, he served our places, and see, they can give you evidence of their service. But when it comes to selflessness, this is where the distinction will be made. Ezekiel was calling them to be selfless leaders. That was the vision of God of a servant. This response should help us to take up the cause of the powerless, to represent the widows, the orphans, and the poor, to take cause of those who are not like us. In the time of Isaiah, special responsibility and position were given to those who had responsibility over the powerless. He commended them before God. In Kenya, we have lost trust in our democratic institutions. The parliament is crippled by criminal abuse of power. They are unable to call the president to account. MPs have abandoned their constitution mandate and the constitution they swore to keep and to be loyal to. They are only loyal now to their selfish interests. This assembly of people seem to be constantly being turned into with justice. How are we to live to God's expectation? We are at a stalemate. As I say, the crisis is real. I take example from South Africa. When they were not able to make way forward, their leaders were arrested, Mandela and others. The military struggle was destroyed, and apartheid now seemed to really have the full time to rule. God raised certain people, And I credit more this to someone like Steve Biko, who was a leader of the Black Conscience Movement. And they decided to break down the code of what fed the apartheid government. For 50 years, every community was divided according to their race, and they grew according to that. Political parties were organized around their color divisions. And nothing would prosper or would break through this through that. Education was organized like that. Settlements were organized according to that. But this breaking into the code that divided the society was not possible. So with the SOSU movement of university students, they started pushing the very famous wording for this Black Conscious movement was, if you are oppressed, then you are black, irrespective of your color, of your race. They started bringing in the radical white students who gave them hands, and they started organizing themselves outside this regime of their colors. They found issues that they rallied around, values that they stood for. They were a revolutionary people, and their revolution was organized around what Martin Luther King Jr. called revolution of values: decency, integrity, honesty, courage, virtue, self-sacrificing love for other people. Alan Bosak discusses one of these events. The university was divided according to race. So when the workers went on strike, who are mainly black people, because of low pay, the white students joined together with them and went also on strike, forcing the principal to realize that everyone is concerned about this. And it showed that those who are blessed can take case of those who are oppressed and make the changes begin to happen. So if we've got to have a sustainable peace and justice, if we've got to deliver structures, then we've got to be revolutionaries of values. We've got to look for decency. Is what happening among the people decent? Is it integrity? Is it about honesty? We've got to fight over virtues. And we shouldn't look and say, this is not right. I was in a group and people were already discussing. They have killed our people for so long, and I also heard Somalis also complaining. They really killed us a lot. Let the others also now experience what we used to experience. Have you heard something like that? But that's not the position we should take. Our position should be, when it is wrong for him, it is wrong for everyone. And that was what they were arguing. And that was what Freire Fanon said, that we've got to think of the oppressed and the oppressor together. The law, we should be people who seek to free the one who is also oppressing us. My friends, the police are not the wrong people. We have been trapped into a political problem. The police who are oppressing you is equally oppressed, and we've got to free them. They've got to see them differently and not hate to kill. The person in power who is oppressing is also needing release from his bondage. We've got to find a way of releasing everybody. Such are the ones Steve Biko called selfless revolutionaries. Because for them, people would be over profit. Justice would be inclusive and compassionate. Dignity would be irreplaceable. Let's think of the dignity of that person. When one oppresses the other, they have lost certain level of dignity. We've got to dignify them. We have a common friend with Prof. She's late now. Michere Mugo, professor, had always valued humanity. And in one occasion, she was going to check into a plane and was so mistreated by one of the black guys who was a porter, who was to help her check in her luggage. And she was so rude, the man was so rude. And eventually, the person let her in, and she went through. Then she came back and looked for that person and gave her the tip. Normally, the one who is kind to you, you will give the tip. But she went for this one who really did wrong to her and gave her a $20 tip. And so you were asked, why do you do that? Say that guy may have been just oppressed. I mean, he needs dignity. If he did right, I would have still done that. But his doing wrong doesn't rob him of his dignity. I just need to make him respect the next person coming. And that was a lesson that stuck with me. When people do wrong to you, let's go beyond what they've done and see them as human. Suppose they did what was right. What would we have done? This generation deserves a better life. Our children deserve better days. I know many who sacrificed their lives to come back to Africa, to build institutions and to build countries for the future of our children. There are those who carried that struggle, and they lived, and they are now looking at what we have. They are almost falling. I mean, they are so depressed. They are so discouraged with what is going on. We think that we've had an incomplete revolution, but it's possible. We must continue to be dissatisfied with the situation that things are in. We've got to fight for that almost tomorrow that we wanted. And in our dissatisfaction, may this fuel righteous anger among us, that we will complete this revolution, this idea of how we treat one another, how we value one another, how we walk together, how we must lift people from oppression, poor, and how we must come alongside the defenseless and the vulnerable. Our sustaining revolution should be our common striving towards wholeness, and we must be open to learning and unlearning things and give Kenya a human face. Augustine had said, hope has two beautiful daughters. One is called anger, and one is called courage. Anger at what is going wrong in the world, and courage to rise and do something about it. Hope that is not blind. Hope is power that will bear us to give people dignity. And that is what we are called to. This is what we are about. And Jesus, summarizing this, talking to us, says in Matthew 25, when the king comes, he will separate the sheep from the goat. And the sheep will put on his right, and he will say, enter the kingdom that was prepared for you. Why would it be so? Because he says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was sick, you saw me. Very, very practical things of relationship. And they will be surprised and say, when were you? And he tells them, what you did to the least of this, you did that also to me. And the others will say, I was hungry and you did not even notice me. And they will ask, when did we do that, Jesus? You saw me in church every day. But he will tell them, when you did not do it to the least of this, you did not do it to me. Building a just community should start from this congregation. We should begin to recognize one another, not of our ranks, but look at people as they present their needs and them as humans. It should begin from how we selflessly treat one another here, that I go an extra mile to love light that shines farthest, shines brightest near home. Give us the strength we need. Give us your spirit to be true shepherds and selfless servants under your charge.